The silence of a rainy Tuesday in 2024 was shattered not by a scream, but by the dull metallic clink of a shovel hitting something. 10 inches beneath the soil of a forgotten backyard, a secret was waiting to breathe. It had lived in the dark for 23 years. A jagged 10-inch serrated hunting knife, wrapped in rotting, oil-stained plastic. Its surface was a graveyard of microscopic evidence. It still clung to the DNA of a woman the world had long ago labeled a cold case. Imagine walking over a grave every day. Hosting summer barbecues, planting roses directly above the very tool that ended a life. You were oblivious. The key to a monster's identity was inches beneath your boots, resting in the cold, damp womb of the earth. The silence has been broken. And now the past is screaming for blood. The year was 2001. The world was changing, but in the small town of Willow Creek, time seemed to stand still. It was a place of the American dream, etched into every white picket fence and perfectly manicured lawn. The setting for our nightmare was a modest, 2-story blue house. This was the home of Elena Vance. At 24 years old, Elena was the embodiment of hope. A top-tier nursing student, known for a laugh that could cut through the thickest gloom of a hospital ward. She brought soup to sick neighbors and rescued stray cats. She was vibrant, loved, and she was being watched. The autumn of 2001 was particularly cold. On the night of October 14th, a thick mist rolled off the nearby river. Swallowing the streetlights of Willow Creek, Elena had just finished a grueling double shift at the local clinic. Exhausted but content. The neighborhood was silent, save for the rustle of fallen maple leaves scraping against the asphalt. At 11:15 p.m., she made her final phone call, a brief, cheerful conversation with her mother. "I'm just making some herbal tea and heading straight to bed, Mom. I'll see you for brunch tomorrow. Love you." Those were the last words ever recorded from Elena Vance. The tea kettle was on the stove, water simmering, but the tea would never be poured. Let us reconstruct that night through the lens of the evidence found years later. The killer didn't break in. He didn't need to. In Willow Creek, doors were often left unlocked, a testament to a vanished era of trust. The intruder had been standing in the shadows, shielded by a dense thicket of oak trees. He watched the kitchen light flicker on. He watched Elena move past the window. A silhouette of domestic peace. As the kettle began to whistle, a high-pitched lonely sound that masked the creak of the back door, he slipped inside. He moved with a terrifying familiarity, as if he had rehearsed this intrusion 1,000 times in his mind. There was no struggle in the kitchen. The attack was swift, surgical, and fueled by a dark, inexplicable rage. Elena was intercepted in the hallway, the narrow space between her sanctuary and her rest. The first strike was decisive. The serrated blade, the one we found 23 years later, did its work with brutal efficiency. In the cinematic recreation of this horror, imagine the flickering light of a single hallway lamp. The killer doesn't speak. There is only the sound of heavy breathing and the rhythmic thud of a body hitting the hardwood floor. He stood over her, not as a human but as a predator observing his work. He didn't take her jewelry. He didn't take the cash sitting on the counter. He took her life, and then he took his leave, disappearing back into the mist, carrying the red-stained blade like a dark trophy. When Elena didn't show up for brunch the next morning, her mother's intuition flared. She arrived at the blue house to find the back door swaying in the breeze. The tea kettle was still on the stove. The water long since evaporated, the metal scorched black. Elena lay in the hallway, a fallen angel in the dust. The initial police response was a whirlwind of activity. Detective Marcus Miller, a veteran with 20 years on the force, led the scene. He would later describe the Vance house as the cleanest crime scene he had ever encountered. No fingerprints that didn't belong to Elena. No foreign fibers. No footprints in the mud outside. The killer had worn gloves and surgical booties, a level of forensic awareness that was rare. For a random street crime in 2001, the suspect list was short and frustratingly empty. There was the ex-boyfriend, a local mechanic named Greg, who had a heated argument with Elena 2 weeks prior. He was interrogated for 18 hours, his life dismantled, but his alibi was airtight. He was 60 miles away. Caught on a gas station security camera. Then there was the peeping Tom neighbor, but he was physically incapable of the violence. For months, the police combed the woods. They used divers in the river. They searched every trash bin in a 5-mile radius. They were looking for the knife. Detective Miller knew that without the weapon, they were chasing a ghost. But the knife was nowhere to be found. It was as if it had dematerialized into thin air. As the years turned into decades, the Vance case became a cautionary tale in Willow Creek. The blue house was sold. The blood-stained floorboards replaced. New families moved in, unaware that they were sleeping yards away from a monster's secret. Fast forward to the spring of 2024. The current owners, the Harrison family, decided to build an in-ground pool for their children. The heavy machinery arrived. As the excavator clawed deep into the earth near the back fence, an area that had been a dense flower bed for 20 years, it struck something. Not a rock, not a pipe, a bundle. The operator, a man who had seen his share of buried trash, noticed the peculiar way it was wrapped. It was thick, industrial-grade plastic, secured with electrical tape. He climbed down, wiped away the grime, and saw the glint of steel. He called the police, not knowing he had just ended a 23-year-old game of hide-and-seek. When the forensics team arrived, they treated the backyard like a holy site, using modern vacuum extraction technology. They didn't just look for blood. They looked for touch DNA, skin cells trapped in the microscopic crevices of the knife's handle. The results were a thunderbolt from the blue. The DNA didn't belong to any of the original suspects. It matched a man named Samuel Thorne. In 2001, Thorne was a 30-year-old independent contractor, hired by the city to inspect the gas lines on Elena Street. He was a ghost in the system, a man who blended into the background. In his orange vest and work boots, he had been interviewed briefly by police in 2001, but because he had a legitimate reason to be there, he was dismissed.
Thorne had spent the last 2 decades living a life of quiet normalcy in a neighboring state. He was a father, a husband, a deacon at his church. He thought the earth had swallowed his sin, but the earth has a long memory. When the police raided his home in June 2024, they found a man who had grown soft with age. His eyes still held the cold vacancy of that October night. He had buried the knife in Elena's own backyard, believing that the police would never search a place they had already cleared. It was a gamble that paid off for 23 years, until a swimming pool excavation brought his world crashing down. The trial of Samuel Thorne was a collision of past and present. The defense tried to argue that the DNA was degraded, that the knife could have been planted. But the science was unyielding. The serrations on the blade perfectly matched the unique bone-nicking patterns found on Elena's skeletal remains. During a 2024 exhumation, the knife was the final, undeniable witness. In the end, Thorne was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. As the judge read the verdict, Thorne remained silent, his face a mask of indifference. He had enjoyed 23 years of freedom that Elena Vance was denied. The community of Willow Creek finally exhaled. The blue house stands there today, its garden now empty of secrets, its soil turned over and exposed to the light. But the case leaves us with a chilling realization. How many other Thorns are walking among us, hiding behind a badge, a uniform, or a friendly smile? How many murder weapons are resting just inches beneath our feet as we drink our morning coffee? The truth is rarely buried forever. It just waits for someone to dig deep enough. What is the most disturbing cold case discovery you have ever heard of? Do you believe there is such a thing as a perfect crime? Or does the universe always find a way to balance the scales? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this investigation into the Vance case compelling, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Dark Case Files. We are dedicated to bringing the truth out of the shadows, one story at a time. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a deep dive into the world of true crime. Until next time, keep your eyes open and stay vigilant. The truth is closer than you think. Thank you for watching Dark Case Files.